Welcome to the second part of my conversation with Angus Stewart about Han Song's Hospital. In this part, we discuss the novel as an example of dystopian fiction, as well as its relationship to Western and traditional Chinese medicine. If you haven't yet listened to the first part, I suggest you check that out first. And if you're enjoying our conversation, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Welcome back to the second part of my discussion with Angus Stewart on Han Song's Hospital. If you haven't yet listened to the first part, please do have a listen to that before joining us for this section. So we talked a bit about the novel in general, its place in Chinese science fiction, and, there's a close relationship between science fiction and dystopian fiction, which we sort of touched on, but maybe not directly. The novel follows the structure of classic dystopian fiction to some extent. You think 1984, Brave New World, where you have a protagonist sort of attempting to rebel against the system. Do you think, how far can we take that comparison? Do you think it is similar to other dystopian novels? Does it say much about the nature of authority and rebellion? Are there differences with novels like 1984 that people might be familiar with?
I think it would be fair to call it some kind of a dystopia. I think if we're looking for sort of a full picture of how a regime rules over an authoritarian system in one country, it's not that sort of one for one with reality. One that springs to mind, well, we mentioned Kafka. Kafka does sort of spring to mind. One of his books that I've got in my notes here that I had a very Kafka-esque experience of trying to read is The Castle. So in The Castle, a surveyor is sent to try and meet with, I guess, the lord or whoever is the boss of the land in a castle. He arrives in the town, is constantly trying to gain access to the castle, is constantly frustrated. And to really cap things off, Kafka died before he finished the novel. So the surveyor never even reaches the end of the book. Never mind getting access to the castle. Never mind getting into the castle to meet the boss. My experience of listening to The Castle was downloading an audiobook, not getting the tracks arranged in the right order. I think they were arranged alphabetically when I needed them to be arranged by number. So I was listening to this unfinished novel on shuffle, hearing Kafka's main character getting bounced around, getting nowhere. Why is it like Hospital? Well, Yang Wei, our main character, is about as passive and ineffectual as a Kafka protagonist. He gets wheeled around a lot, manipulated, bounced from ward to ward. He's somewhat susceptible to I guess, being led on romantically, at least once or twice in the book. He's sort of following a woman around like a lost puppy. I think that's, I mean, I'm no Kafka expert, but I believe that's an aspect of his works. And he's in a pretty abject situation. I don't know if he is in such a state of self-disgust as our main character from the Metamorphosis, who's turned into a bug. But I think the abjection is quite Kafka-ish as well. And like Kafka, maybe it's looking more at like a psychological world or a abstract world rather than like, say, 1984, which is imagining what's happening if, fascism and communism fuse together and become the future of the world. I don't really think it's fair to say Hospital is a takedown of communism. It's much more about medical systems than political systems, I would say. But there is that red flavor there. Brave New World, we're starting to get closer to the mark because there is a medical dystopian medical control system in Brave New World. People take Soma, essentially happy pills, and that's built into the structure of society. A couple of films kind of spring to mind that are Again, hard to say if they're dystopias or if they're just looking at the body, health, medicine, and their cultural effects. One's a recent film by David Cronenberg, himself a pretty veteran director, Crimes of the Future. I guess his
Mm,
whole film, most of his films have some medical or biological element. I'll get into Crimes of the Future, but the other one I was going to name is directed by his son. Forget his son's first name, but we'll call him Cronenberg Jr. Has an interesting film, I think from the early 2010s called Antiviral. So Crimes from the Future stars a, you know, himself a victim. Victim is not the right word. Himself, we can see in the film that Viggo Mortensen, a Cronenberg regular known to most of us as Aragorn, is playing a pretty properly old man in this
mm.
film. And it's in a future where humans have transformed the environment to such an
Excuse me.
extent that people are being born who can eat plastic, and the world seems to be in a sort of a degraded state. Society's ticking along, but it seems to have, I don't know, become a bit more Spartan and less wealthy. But and people are, I get, yeah, the important thing to mention is many people are growing new superfluous organs because of how much pollution. Maybe we're thinking of things like microplastics, chemicals.
Mm,
They've suffused the environment to an extent that people are growing these new superfluous organs, and a culture has developed around removing them. And it's been turned by people like our main character into sort of a form of art. And I think it's sort of the director is clearly his state of mind is part of the story because this artist is wondering if he's lost his touch, if his organ extraction performances aren't as good as the young up and comers,
mm,
and which is kind of pertinent as well because Chinese science fiction, what I forgot to say earlier, is a new generation is incoming and are doing
mm,
things that people like Liu Cixin and Han Song couldn't. So yeah, anyway, there's ruminations on the sort of cultural dimension of health, sickness, and treatment. In this
mm,
case, it's surgery rather than medicine, but still. I guess I don't think hospital looks quite as much as surgery as it does medicine, but
mm,
by the by, antiviral, I don't know if it's a closer match, but I mean, it's worth describing to get people to watch it. In antiviral, culture has also developed around sickness where people, it's a celebrity culture like the one we live in today, where people want to catch safe versions of diseases that celebrities have had. So if I don't know, let's say Kim Kardashian's strain of flu can be sort of put in a tube and marketed, and then people can go and experience what it was like to have the same strain of the cold or the flu that their favorite celebrity have, and it brings them closer to them. I believe as well there's a black market in an antiviral where people will grow synthetic meats grown
mm.
from their favorite a tissue sample of their favorite celebrity. So you could go and have a Brad Pitt burger if you know the secret password at your local butcher. So I guess that's not medicine, but it's looking at the strange frontiers, the strange worlds that the frontiers of bioscience could take us to.
Mm,
And then a more obvious older one going back to gene therapy is Gattaca,
mm,
which just imagines what if gene therapy for non-medical purposes has become the norm and it's created a two-tier sort of class system. None of those are an exact match for the strange world of
mm,
hospital, but I think they're looking at how changes in medicine could change society and exaggerating it as genre fiction can.
mm.
So another long answer that I didn't really get into many of the book's specifics, but yeah, it's a dystopia that focuses strongly on medicines, sickness, and their extended dimensions and how they shape our lives.
And I
But I
think,
think, sorry, one
yeah, go
last
on.
thing.
Mm,
I think if you don't, I think if you don't feel that when you're reading Hospital and you don't feel it relates to your life, because I don't really feel that it relates to my life, but I've never been in and out of hospital like Han Song has, or like someone with a chronic illness has.
mm,
I think the most interesting, well, some of the most interesting perspective you could get on the book is from people who do have to navigate the world of the hospital, and especially maybe in a world where the world of the hospital hasn't been separated from like the economy
Mm.
at the user end, where
Yeah.
like Michael Berry was saying, his navigation of the medical system in America also requires him to navigate the insurance system. And I know I'm veering away from the question here, but sorry, yeah, maybe more of that will come up later.
Well, it's actually, I think it takes us quite nicely into the next question, which is
So
to go
all
back to
part of the plan.
distinction. Perfectly planned, yeah. I mean, earlier you made the distinction between hard and soft sci-fi when you're
Hmm.
contrasting hospital with three body. And so, for anybody who isn't aware, hard sci-fi, to give a simplistic definition, is concerned with the sort of sciencey aspect and the technology. Soft sci-fi, much more with the social, political effects thereof. You put hospital on the soft side, but as you've just said, and another Kafka-esque element of the novel is the way that the bureaucracy becomes all encompassing and the world becomes hospital. So, I mean, does the distinction even hold anymore between the social and the scientific in this novel? Or do these sort of collapse into each other because everything is treatment? You can't sort of say the science is over here and the social effect is over here. I mean, how would you respond to that? Do you think it's sort of getting us away from the hard versus soft idea to some extent?
Hmm. Um, could you could you give me the essence of that question again? I think I failed to keep track as you were asking.
Okay, yeah, it was a winding question. So, okay, classically, we've got hard sci-fi, science and technology, soft sci-fi, society, politics. Now, in hospital, the scientific advances in medicine have driven a social and economic system that has then become all encompassing. So I suppose my question is, in hospital, is it possible to separate the hard and the soft bits? Doesn't it all become one sort of hybrid entanglement?
Boring answer, yes. Um, I think to really give you the great answer on this one, I would have had to have freshly read the book. I
Mm,
think what I'd emphasize is the scientific angle we get is it's biology, bioscience, where it could take us, what it could do. Um, but I would say probably the soft side is more dominant. And I think part of the soft side that I kind of touched on before is like it's the existential side, or even just, the experience of other social things like doctor-patient relationships.
mm,
It's interesting that in this book, in certain wards, the doctors are worshipped,
mm,
treated with reverence. There's a real hierarchy between the doctors and the patients. And similarly, the patients develop their own little sort of societies.
mm.
So again, I've never spent a long time in a hospital ward. I don't know if we can say there are sort of patient cultures, doctor cultures, but yeah, I think the softer side is stronger. It's certainly intertwined with science and medicine in the setting of like a hospital, a healthcare system. I'm looking at my notes here, trying to connect my notes from a long time ago, trying to connect them with his answer here. The thing I wrote in my notes that sounds awfully clever is that we could consider this being a novel in which multiple novels are at war. Now, one interesting factoid I do know about this book is that the translated English version is in some ways a different novel
Mm,
from the one that was published in Chinese, because when Michael Berry um, reached out to Han Song and said, "Okay, I've been chosen to translate your book. Could you send me the original language manuscript, please?" I think Han Song's response was something like, "Well, I've revised it quite a lot, and I'm not sure which the original version is. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look at my different chapters and versions, and I'm gonna send you the version I want you to receive." And there may be a dimension here where the version, given that this is a kind of often political and very dark book, maybe the version that was published in Chinese wasn't the version he wanted to be published.
mm.
So there really is, in a sense, at least two novels of war in the book. Um, we could consider is the sort of Kafkaesque story running against the like more political story. I don't know. This is a sort of that's a lazy answer. It's an incoherent answer, but suffice to say that there's lots of dimensions. Sometimes they're consistent with each other, sometimes they're not. Sometimes I feel like he sat down, wrote a chapter, forgot what was in it, sat down, wrote the next. It's not very coherent in a way.
Mm.
Um, and I think the last bit of my notes, I feel comfortable throwing in. Actually, no, there's two things, two references to two other authors that might be illuminating to think about. Um, I know from having attended a meeting of the London Chinese Science Fiction Book Club where Han Song was the author in question and there as a guest, that I know from that Han Song enjoys, or at least knows of J.G. Ballard,
Mm.
an English author who actually grew up in colonial Shanghai.
Was
Um,
interned, wasn't he, during the Japanese occupation?
yeah, as a boy, if anyone's
Mm.
ever read or seen the film of Empire of the Sun, that's a sort of fictionalized version of a young J.G. Ballard, the situation he was in. I don't know if that's endeared him to Chinese readers or not, but I think Han Song, as a sci-fi aficionado, knows J.G. Ballard. And one of uh, J.G. Ballard's like quotable ideas is that he wanted his writing to be a journey into inner space. He was
Mm.
writing at a time when, I guess, space opera sci-fi, going on a spaceship to another galaxy or to Mars, was not at the cutting edge. His cutting edge sci-fi was a journey into inner space. So like to give you um an interesting pairing with Hospital might be High Rise, which is about a society that develops inside a new high-rise building built for people somewhere in, I think, the south of England. The flats get nicer the higher up you go, and it becomes its own closed system where, being a J.G. Ballard novel, society breaks down and the different people kind of, the law of the jungle takes hold. Different floors go to war with each other. Understandings of what the swimming pool means transform. Understandings of what it means to be on the top floor transform. The spaces of the stairs and elevators become a lot more significant. So a sort of a microculture developing in a closed off system is, I don't know, is it even sci-fi? Is it even horror at that point? Is it
Mm.
a kind of weird sociology? I don't know.
I was
I don't
thinking,
know.
actually, it's funny enough, I was thinking of High Rise when you mentioned Ballard, maybe something like Cocaine Nights. It's some people in nice condominiums with swimming pools, but going nuts because there's no sort of challenge to life anymore, which I think there are similarities in Hospital where it becomes too easy almost. I think
Mm.
Ballard's interesting. I know we're not talking about Han Song now. He said something about, I think, his spiritual home being the Holiday Inn outside the M25 or something. It's sort of almost liking that sterilization of life as well in his very contrary way.
Yeah, you've reminded me of something I meant to bring up. I may have brought this up before. Um, there's a famous clip, it's been memed many times, where Trent Reznor, frontman of Nine Inch Nails, is speaking to the crowd at a gig, and he says something like, "Who's here for a good time? Who's ready for a good time?" And then the crowd goes, "Woo!" And then Trent Reznor says, "Wrong fucking band. We're here for a bad time." Um, that's definitely part of the pleasure I got from reading Hospital, is
Mm,
the dark beauty of a horrible, creepy world. There's a bit in his other story, My Country Does Not Dream, where the character gets a shiver down his spine thinking of the pilots of planes flying over China who are somnambulant. They're flying fast asleep. And with the economy being strengthened by this system where no one ever goes to sleep, there's more planes flying at night than there are at the day in the daytime. And yeah, just these sort of dark, perfect visions have a sort of pleasure to them.
mm,
Although I have to say, I mean, a lot of occasionally in the book, you do get these incredibly vibes driven scenes. Other times it's more just perfunctory, like that bit I quoted earlier. It was kind of just classic expositional info dumping dialogue. But then there's
mm.
other bits which I feel prompted to read. which are just supremely, never mind the intellectual dimension, never mind anything except just the effect of the imagery. So this is another bit from this prologue, far away from the hospital, in a spaceship. I'll just read. This is literally the first 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs of the book. Here we go. Prologue, Red Cross on Mars. The meaning of travel lies not in the journey, but in the destination. The destination of the SS Mahamayuri was Mars. Leaving from Earth and traveling for 324 days, the SS Mahamayuri traversed 225 million kilometers before reaching the orbit of Mars. As its dual-mode nuclear fission engine decelerated, the planet's gravitational field captured the spaceship. Commander Lone Walker was checking the rodent-like humanoid cyborgs floating in the cabin. They had long necks and short-horned heads, and they looked like a cross between humans and monkeys, but the overall appearance was closer to that of a rodent. They were cyborg organisms with bacterial brains, specially genetically modified flora having been implanted into their alloy skulls, working in concert with electronic nerves that not only determined the speed and direction of these rat-man cyborgs, but also allowed them to enter into a perfect imitative trance through biochemical programming. The host could thus achieve a quantum state of transcendental meditation during flight, generating a consciousness able to connect with, and then in quotes, the other world. Do we ever find out what that means? No. Do we ever meet the rat men again? No. But as a piece of disgusting, strange writing, it's just, for me, 10 out of 10. Yeah. I thought there's another thing I wanted to quote. I'm sorry I'm dumping all these quotes, but again, if we want to think about this as horror literature and thinking about what horror could have to do with a mood of doom in a hospital, I'm going to read a short piece of writing by an author I would also suggest pairing with hospital, the work of Thomas Ligotti. And this is a little 2-paragraph thing that I've discovered in a musical form called Welcome to the Unholy City. So again, this is not Han Song. This is Thomas Ligotti, a very depressed American man, but who I think works very nicely paired with this book, Hospital. And you'll see why. Welcome to the Unholy City. In some form or another, everyone must pay a visit to the Unholy City. There is simply no avoiding it, since everything has been designed to lead you to this place. Any road may present a detour that unexpectedly sends you on your way into a great barren landscape where only a sliver of horizon wavers in the empty distance, and no road signs exist to hint at your destination. Any hospital may be equipped with a special elevator where someone wheels you inside and then quickly abandons you. As the doors clamp tightly closed, you finally notice there are no buttons to push, no controls of any kind. This is when the elevator begins to move, dipping and twisting like a carnival ride, taking you closer toward the unholy city. After enduring such episodes or others of a similar sort, you may only wake up screaming, vowing never to close your eyes in sleep. Or you may fall into a fever that no thermometer is able to indicate, and from which there is no recovery. In more extreme cases, you begin to glimpse a blackness like none you have ever seen, and wonder for a time whether this blackness is inside your head or outside, which makes no difference once it begins to compose the outline of the unholy city you're about to enter. So to relate that to Hospital by Han Song, imagine you go to hospital and you never get out. It's probably because you died. But let's imagine a fictional scenario where you enter hospital and you never get out, and you don't know if that's because you're still asleep in the hospital bed, or you've been made immortal, and every time they die, you're brought back to life, or whether it's a scam to keep extracting your savings to pay for your hospital bills. The thing I didn't mention is, I don't know about today, but certainly in maybe like 90s or noughties China, to get the treatment you need, a red envelope could help you. A little envelope filled with money that you could give to the doctor to skip the queue. So there's the horror the deep existential horror, and then there's the bureaucratic horror, and you get it in a very strange form in this book. So you originally asked me if it's hard or soft sci-fi,
Mm,
and again, to boil it all down, it's the hard element is would be medicine, bioscience. The soft element is, I mean, soft sounds, what's the word? Pejorative, but the sort of deeper element, we could call
mm,
it, is all pervasive. But then, yeah, you could think outside the box, call it horror, call it
mm.
call it existential, call it weird, and then we're reaching something closer to what the book is.
And let's finish with one final layer, which is, again, we've touched on it already, but the prevalence of references to Buddhism, which obviously is an old religion, and you gave the description of sort of cyborg rats, which feels very kind of modern sci-fi, but then goes into meditation and transcendence. Also references to traditional Chinese medicine as well. So where do these traditional beliefs sort of sit in the whole kind of meshed together, multi-layered, yeah, amalgamation of ideas that is hospital, do you think?
I think I probably can't say much about traditional Chinese medicine because I don't know that much. What my basic understanding is to contrast Western medicine and traditional Chinese medicine is that Western medicine is you get sick, we sort of nuke the sickness with a treatment, and then you get better, and then you go back to your normal life. Whereas, and it's sort of empirical. It's based on what's the word? Empirical science, um, clinical studies. We know why it works. We know what the Now this is terrible because from my previous job in the pharma trade magazine, and I now edit educational materials for pharmacists. I should know the right terms. Yeah, the term I was trying to think of was mechanism of action.
Mm,
So Western medicine, if you don't know what the mechanism of action is, you don't know why it works, and it's not approved by a regulator, and it's not, you know, been through clinical studies, we don't want it. We need to know why it works. Whereas, in traditional Chinese medicine, to give a classic example, acupuncture is from traditional Chinese medicine. It's based on traditional ancient Chinese ideas about the flow of energy or whatever it is through the body, and it just so happens to work. Um, Whereas I guess other parts of traditional Chinese medicine, like grinding up rhino horns or the body parts of endangered species to cure your erectile dysfunction, maybe not so useful. Maybe there's a reason why we can't find an empirical basis for them. But to, to give a fair comparison with my understanding of traditional Chinese medicine is you look after yourself day to day to avoid getting sick in the first place. If you do get sick, the doses of if you get a traditional Chinese medicine pill, it won't be as potent. You won't take them over such a short period. It will be a more lower doses over a longer period, and hopefully you return to good health. And then you do other traditional practices to stay healthy. So like to think of a couple of examples, if you're in China and your Chinese friend sees you drinking cold water in the winter, they'll be like, "Stop that! You're going to die." Um, and you as a Westerner will be like, "You're a fool." But the truth lies somewhere in between. Your body will regulate its temperature better if it's able to maintain its temperature. So drinking hot stuff in the winter helps your body do that. It does have a holistic effect on your health. So to be fair to traditional Chinese medicine, put the empirical stuff to one side. The blurring between your day-to-day health and the state of your body and medicine is a bit more blurry.
mm,
And probably one thing Western societies could do with learning from is not treating sickness as something that suddenly happens from nowhere,
mm,
and then you buy something or are given something, take it, and then you're better.
yeah.
How that relates to hospital, it, it's I guess it's hard to draw the line, but I guess you could say it helps maybe us understand why medicine would be such a pervasive thing if you're always trying to if your health can be affected by anything, then you could have a paranoid state about your health. I mean, I guess you can
Mm.
see this in the West or anywhere in like health, people that want you to eat raw meat or take their nutritional supplements. There's a whole, I guess, economy or culture of that online now. If you listen to enough podcasts, the
Mm.
wrong podcasts, someone might be trying to sell you something, basically telling you have a problem with your health that you need to fix. And again, what's what's a problem in your body and what's just the natural side effect of being alive.
Mm.
And like ultimately, how do you know what's going on in your body? You're a soul, you're a thinking thing in this head somewhere, but you've got a whole system that you can't see inside of that you need to manage, which is ultimately a bit of a mystery to you. And you do rely on medical authorities to tell you how you manage it. So, I mean, again, I'm not talking about the specifics of plot or characters in the book, but these are all things the book reaches into.
Mm.
And I guess if I could try and make fumble towards cultural differences towards health, this is just sort of an observation, but about longevity. I noticed that, I don't know, I heard the idea of longevity a lot more in China. People might, hope that you're well here, but like there's I believe on your birthday in China, it's especially for older people, I believe, it's traditional to eat really long noodles.
Mm.
It symbolizes a really long life. There's, I guess, a cultural thing where it's not like here, maybe where we either don't talk about death or we're the follower of an Abrahamic religion and we think death is a sort of a non-issue because after you die, you live forever. I got this is just again vibes based. Fact check me, listeners. Shoot me down if I'm wrong. I think people are a bit more cognizant of the fact they're going to die in China. You see old people doing a lot more to look after themselves, um, doing exercise out in the street. Perhaps it's because, I mean, my one theory is why you see so many old people out socializing in the street or in public squares in China is people don't have their own gardens. Not many people have their own personal space where they could do this. But I think health, longevity, well-being are less, again, it's not something that is in a pill in in traditional Chinese culture.
Mm.
But again, I'm speaking in very vague terms. If people feel I've got it very wrong, feel free to shoot me down. And again, with Buddhism, I don't think I have a deeper thought than Han Song is maybe taking this initial Buddhist problem of we're stuck in a body that is dependent on so many things and is subject to decay, rot. How do we get away from it? Um, he's taking the religious answer on how to get away from it and bringing it into science. I'm just telling you what's in the book there. I'm not really
Mm.
analyzing it. I don't think I know enough about Buddhism to take that thought further, but it is there in the book. There's
Well,
a
thank you.
quite a
Yeah.
stew of ideas. They're
Yeah.
not really developed linearly.
No.
It's very much like a you never know what you're getting in the next chapter. But
Yeah, I think that's what makes it interesting that it goes off in these different directions, and just when you sort of think it's critiquing a sort of medico-capitalist thing, then it'll go somewhere else. And yeah, it's there's a lot happening from different angles in that respect. And yeah, thanks for your answers. I think you help people get a sense of the majestic chaos that is hospital. So we'll finish this section here. Please do join us for the third and final section, which Angus will give us some further recommendations on related reading. I know we've mentioned a few things already, but let's we can go back to those and maybe talk about others as well. So please do join us for part 3.